Okie dokie. In this second part video of equalization, or EQ, we're going to look at the same project at just a few specific examples of how I've used EQ on individual instruments. Now, a little bit of a resource that will be really helpful with this is this Sweetwater music instrument frequency cheat sheet. And you can get that just by Googling instrument frequency chart. There's quite a few different ones available, but I really like this one. The reason for that is that it shows you, this is mainly based on instruments and voices, but it shows you where different aspects of the sound are. So for instance, with a bass guitar, in the low frequency areas between around 60 Hz and around 300 Hz, that's where the main weight of that instrument is. In the mid-range, around 600-700 Hz, is where its growl is. In between 2000 and 3000 Hz is the snap. And then we've got sheen in the high frequency. And that's not Charlie Sheen, but that's like the shimmer, the brightness of the sound. Similarly with our kick drum, we've got the punch at around 50 Hz. The boxiness, which might be a negative aspect, in between 300 and 400. And the click, which gives it real clarity, around 5000 Hz. So these charts are often based on, like I say, real instruments such as acoustic guitar, electric guitar, cymbals, real drums. But we can take this same theory and apply it in a more electronic setting. So I'm going to show you a few examples in here. Now the first one I'm going to look at is actually the grand piano. Now if we look to this instrument chart, we've got the piano, there's some bloom down there, but then our main stuff is presence and overtones. So in the middle here is kind of the main note of the instrument. Now what I've done in this equalizer is I've actually removed a lot of the low end. Now I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll turn this equalizer off and I will put another equalizer on and just show you what actually lives down there on this piano. So I'm going to use my low pass filter to remove all the higher aspects of that sound and just show you what happens below 200 Hz. And you should be able to hear that there's not a lot down there. I'll just turn that back off. Now that's why I've removed them frequencies. It's just kind of muddy, bloomy, boomy noise. So with it off. And the reason I've done that, and I do this with quite a lot of instruments, is to keep them out of the way of the kick drum and the bass. In this case, sort of 808 synthy type stuff. Because that low area is really, really easy to clutter up. You know, if you've got too many instruments playing frequencies down there, your mix becomes really, really muddy and unclear. So quite a good habit to be in is to remove the low frequencies from any instrument that isn't your kick or your bass. Now another thing I've done here is actually used the low pass filter to remove some of the upper frequencies as well. Now the reason I've done this is to push it a little bit further back in the mix. I didn't want the piano really up in your face. I wanted it to just be sat there nice and chill. This EQ type, removing the low end and removing the high end, is actually how you create the lo-fi sound. So if you wanted to create lo-fi hip-hop, you'd use an equalizer a little bit like this, perhaps a bit more exaggerated. Just take that back to where it was. So let's listen to it without the EQ at all and with the EQ. So you should hopefully notice there, and feel free to rewind, that it's just a little bit thinner with the equalizer on. Now that's what I was going for. I'm going to move on to this square lead here. I've used a couple of different filter types here. So I've used my high pass filter, to remove the bass end below 476 Hz. I've used a low shelve from 2900 Hz to just create this like swooping curve. So if I turn that off, we'll see the impact it has. It's just lowering all of them frequencies. You can see that graph change. And then I'm using one of these bell filters just to further remove the 750 Hz. Again, just to give that a bit more of a scoop there. Now the reason being, if I play this without the EQ at all, you should notice that this sounds a little bit beefier and a little bit heavier. And that's really important for how it works with the piano. So let's just listen to them two together. And I'm going to start off with the equalizer off. And what you should notice is that they're kind of fighting for that mid-frequency area. Then if I put that equalizer on, you should notice that the square lead sits a little bit above the piano and it's just out of its way. So I'll flick between it being on and off. So what you might notice so far is that I've not done any boosting with my EQ. I'm just removing frequency areas that I don't need. Sticking with the same theme, let's have a look at this downward sequencer. This is one of my pads. It's made using Alchemy. And again, you'll notice a high pass EQ has been used to remove the low frequencies, and then I've just ducked off the high end as well, just to sit it a little bit further back in the mix. So without the EQ at all, and with the EQ, so it's just been thinned out a little bit with the EQ. Now again, I'm not needing to boost anywhere because I've removed the frequencies that I don't need. If I play all these together, and I'll turn off this EQ here. Pop it back on. Because all that's on that downward sequence of that pad, all that's there is just noise and rumble down in that low end. And that's just going to get in the way of our subs and our kick. So it's a lot clearer with that EQ on. So there's a few specific uses of EQs. Now, you're focusing mainly on the high instruments there, and just it's about removing frequencies to get them out of the way of other things. So if it is a really high instrument, let's say it's a guitar solo, a lead vocal, a little sort of thin lead, take out the low frequencies. If it's a piano, and you don't want it up in your face, take out some of them high frequencies, as well as the low ones. And particularly with like synthesizer sounds, you really need to control them, by removing low frequencies and taking the high frequencies out to sit them a bit further back in the mix.